In 2024, my team uncovered a massive machine buried beneath the Great Pyramid, built with technology centuries ahead of us, yet surrounded by hieroglyphs describing how to operate a temporal reconstruction engine. When I touched its crystalline console, figures appeared out of thin air. Humans from the year 2089, speaking flawless English, claiming they had waited 65 years for me to activate the time machine they had hidden in ancient Egypt. But if these future humans have been guiding our civilization for millennia, why are they suddenly locked in a desperate timeline war against rival versions of humanity trying to erase time travel itself? Dr. Mitchell, you need to see this immediately. Ahmed's voice cuts through the stale air as I descend into the newly exposed shaft beneath the Great Pyramid, my headlamp sweeping across walls carved with symbols no archaeologist alive has ever catalogued. The moment my boots hit the chamber floor, the vibration from the stone beneath my feet tells me this isn't just another tomb. It's something alive, waiting, and far older than history itself. The chamber stretches out before us like a cathedral built for giants, its walls rising 40 feet to a ceiling carved with mathematical precision that makes our modern engineering look primitive. But it's not the size that makes my hands shake as I document our findings. It's the machine that dominates the center of the space, its crystalline components pulsing with faint blue light that creates shadows on walls covered in hieroglyphs that seem to move when I'm not looking directly at them. "Sarah, this is impossible," Elena whispers as she runs her electromagnetic detector over surfaces that register energy readings beyond anything her equipment was designed to measure. The quantum signatures from this machine indicate construction using principles that our most advanced theories barely understand. But look at the walls. The hieroglyphs are definitely authentic 4th Dynasty period. Ahmed works frantically to photograph the wall inscriptions, his expertise in ancient Egyptian languages challenged by text that follows familiar patterns but describes concepts that shouldn't exist in any historical period. "These hieroglyphs are talking about star charts," he calls out, his voice carrying the excitement and terror of someone whose worldview is crumbling in real time. "But they show constellations as they will appear thousands of years in the future." The machine itself defies every assumption about ancient technology. Crystalline structures spiral upward in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, connected by what appears to be flowing light that moves through transparent tubes in rhythms that match my heartbeat. Metal components that shouldn't exist in ancient Egypt gleam with a perfection that suggests manufacturing processes unknown to archaeology. "Dr. Mitchell," calls James Rivera, our team's engineer, from his position near the machine's base. "I'm detecting active power systems. This thing isn't just ancient, it's running. After thousands of years buried under the pyramid, it's still operating on some kind of energy source that doesn't match any technology I know." Elena's instruments detect electromagnetic fields that create standing waves in the dusty air around us. "The energy readings are increasing," she reports, her voice tight with scientific excitement battling against survival instinct. "It's like the machine is responding to our presence, powering up systems that have been dormant." I approach the central console, where crystalline surfaces display symbols that shift between hieroglyphic text and mathematical equations I don't recognize. "Ahmed, can you translate these?" I ask, pointing to inscriptions that appear to be updating in real time, changing from ancient script to something that looks almost like computer programming language. It's writing new instructions," Ahmed breathes, his translation skills stretched to their limits. The text says something about temporal reconstruction protocols and causal stability maintenance. "But Sarah, these concepts don't exist in ancient Egyptian vocabulary. Someone has enhanced the language with words that won't be invented for centuries." Rivera's engineering background allows him to identify components that should be impossible in any ancient context. "These aren't Bronze Age tools," he announces, studying junction points where crystal meets metal in seamless bonds. "The precision of these connections requires manufacturing techniques that exceed current industrial capabilities." Through our communication equipment, I try to contact our surface team, but the electromagnetic fields from the machine create interference that turns our radio signals into static, filled with what sounds almost like whispered voices speaking in languages I don't recognize. "The hieroglyphic displays are changing," Ahmed reports with growing alarm. "New text is appearing, instructions for something called Phase 7 Archaeological Survey. And Sarah, it mentions you by name." Elena's readings spike as the machine's energy output increases dramatically. Something's happening. she announces, backing away from the central console as lights begin flowing through the crystalline structures in patterns that create harmonic vibrations throughout the chamber. The quantum fluctuations are off the charts. This machine is manipulating space-time at a local level. I study the hieroglyphic instructions that continue to update on the machine's surface, translations that make no sense in any historical context. Dr. Sarah Mitchell will activate the Temporal Reconstruction Engine at precisely 14:47 local time on June 15th, 2024, initiating contact with Project Kronos coordinators. How could ancient Egyptians know my name? I ask the empty air, though the question feels pointless as I check my watch and see that it's 14:46. How could they predict the exact time we would discover this chamber? The machine's harmonic vibrations intensify, creating resonance patterns that make the ancient stones around us sing with frequencies that bypass my ears and resonate directly in my bones. Dust motes in the air begin moving in spirals that follow mathematical patterns too complex to be natural. Dr. Mitchell, Rivera calls out urgently. The power levels are reaching critical thresholds. Whatever this machine was designed to do, it's preparing to do it right now. Elena's instruments register dimensional distortions that make her equipment scream with feedback. The quantum foam is destabilizing, she reports. Local spacetime is becoming flexible around the machine. Sarah, whatever you decide to do, you need to decide quickly. Ahmed translates final hieroglyphic warnings that appear on surfaces throughout the chamber. Caution. Temporal contact protocols require precise timing to maintain causal stability. Deviation from established parameters may result in paradox formation. As the countdown in my mind reaches 14:47 and the machine's energy output reaches levels that make the air itself shimmer with distortion, I face a choice that will echo across more than just my archaeological career. The console before me pulses with invitation, covered in instructions that someone from another time has left specifically for this moment. Whatever this machine is, I tell my team as my fingers hover above the crystalline surface. Whoever built it knew we'd be here. They've been waiting for us. The instant my hand makes contact, reality bends. Sarah, step away from the console! Elena shouts. But her voice is swallowed by the eruption of light colors my eyes were never meant to perceive. My hand won't let go. It feels like gravity has turned sideways, pinning me in place. And through the connection, I feel something vast and conscious, stirring awake after centuries of silence. The hieroglyphs carved into the walls blaze to life. Shifting faster than Ahmed can translate, ancient symbols morph into future alphabets, then collapse into equations that describe time itself. The machine isn't just responding. It's feeding information directly into my nervous system, rewriting me in ways I don't yet understand. The quantum fluctuations are creating dimensional rifts. Elena reports over the harmonic vibrations that make speech difficult, her instruments registering readings that break through the upper limits of her detection equipment. Sarah, the machine is manipulating space-time in ways that shouldn't be possible. Local reality is becoming unstable. Through the neural connection established by my contact with the console, I experience visions that flood my consciousness with impossible images. The Great Pyramid under construction, but the workers wear modern clothing and operate machinery that looks like it belongs in a science fiction movie. Ancient Egypt, not as a primitive civilization, but as a carefully managed historical project, supervised by people who speak contemporary English and carry devices that make our smartphones look like stone tools. Ahmed, translate this quickly, Rivera calls out, pointing to hieroglyphic text that appears across multiple wall surfaces simultaneously, updating in real time as if someone is typing messages from another dimension. The symbols are changing faster than I can document them. Ahmed's face goes pale as he reads inscriptions that describe our current situation with terrifying accuracy. It says, "Our archaeological team was scheduled to discover this chamber on June 15th, 2024, he reports, his voice shaking with disbelief. It lists our names, our specialties, even our personality profiles. Sarah, whoever wrote this, has been planning this encounter for a very long time. The machine's energy output increases exponentially, creating electromagnetic fields that make our equipment float in patterns that follow mathematical principles I can feel but not understand. Rivera's engineering tools orbit around the central console, like planets circling a star, while Elena's detector readings scroll through numbers that exceed her equipment's capacity to display. Look at the timestamp. Elena points to her instruments, which show temporal distortions that make our chronometers display multiple different times simultaneously. According to my readings, it's 14, 47, but also 14, 52, and somehow 14, 43. The machine is creating temporal flexibility in local space. Through the neural interface, I access the machine's operational protocols, discovering that it's called a Temporal Reconstruction Engine designed for Archaeological Survey Mission Phase 7. The hieroglyphic menus offer options I don't understand but feel compelled to explore. Historical verification protocols, causal loop maintenance, and most ominously, emergency paradox prevention. Sarah, you're changing, Ahmed observes with growing alarm as he notices that my eyes now reflect light in patterns that match the machine's crystalline components. The interface is modifying your neural structure to handle information processing beyond normal human capabilities. Rivera attempts to document the technological components he can identify, but his engineering background provides no framework for understanding machinery that operates by manipulating the basic structure of cause and effect. The power source appears to be drawing energy from the quantum vacuum, he reports. It's extracting power from the fundamental uncertainty of reality itself. Elena's readings detect massive objects moving through space-time around our location, not physical movement through normal dimensions, but trajectory changes that suggest intelligence traveling through alternate methods. Something's approaching, she announces. Multiple contacts, using transportation principles that my equipment can barely detect. Through the machine's enhanced sensory capabilities, I perceive figures materializing in the chamber around us. Not holograms or projections, but solid humans wearing clothing that's almost contemporary but enhanced with materials that seem to respond to their thoughts. They move with the confidence of people who are exactly where they expect to be. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, says a woman who appears to be in her 40s, but whose eyes carry the depth of someone who has witnessed centuries of human development. Welcome to Project Kronos. I am Dr. Lisa Chen, Mission Coordinator for the Temporal Archaeological Survey. We've been waiting 65 years for this moment. Ahmed drops his translation equipment as he realizes the implications. You're human, he breathes. 2089, to be precise. Dr. Chen responds with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather, though chronological sequence becomes somewhat flexible when you're operating temporal reconstruction technology. We are, quite literally, your descendants. Rivera stares at the newcomer's equipment, recognizing engineering principles that extend his current knowledge by decades. The technological advancement. How did human civilization develop so rapidly? With guidance, Chen explains, gesturing toward displays that show human history from perspectives that span multiple timelines. Carefully planned interventions designed to accelerate development while maintaining causal stability. Every major breakthrough your civilization achieved received subtle assistance from temporal archaeological teams. Elena's instruments register the presence of multiple individuals whose biological signatures indicate human genetics, enhanced with modifications that allow survival in environments spanning different time periods. You've been influencing our development, she realizes with growing understanding. The pyramids, the technological leaps, the scientific discoveries, all guided by Project Kronos, Chen confirms. But now we face a crisis that requires direct cooperation with your time period. The timeline wars are beginning, and humanity's future depends on the choices your generation makes in the coming hours. As more figures materialize around us, a full team of temporal archaeologists, whose arrival transforms the ancient chamber into a command hub laced with technology that bends reality itself. I feel through the neural interface that none of this was an accident. We haven't simply discovered the machine beneath the Great Pyramid. We've been drafted into something far larger. Sarah, my readings show they're completely solid, Elena whispers, her voice trembling as she sweeps an electromagnetic scanner through the space where Dr. Lisa Chen now stands. The readouts display normal human heat signatures and bioelectric activity, even though just moments ago Chen had stepped out of lightning and thin air. The chamber no longer resembles an archaeological dig. It looks like the set of a science fiction film brought to life. The 12 figures from 2089 move with unshakable confidence, unpacking instruments that make our best technology look like primitive tools. Their clothes shimmer subtly, fabric shifting colors with the light, and their boots hover a fraction above the dust, untouched by the weight of time itself. "Dr. Ahmed Hassan," says Dr. Marcus Webb, their team archaeologist, addressing Ahmed with a familiarity that suggests extensive research into our personal backgrounds. "Your translation work on the pyramid texts was crucial for establishing the linguistic bridge between ancient Egyptian and our temporal communication protocols." Ahmed stares at the hieroglyphic displays that now cover every surface of the machine, watching as ancient symbols rearrange themselves to form messages in real time. "You've been updating these inscriptions," he realizes, his voice carrying the wonder of someone watching impossible become routine. "The hieroglyphs aren't ancient. They're contemporary, written by your people using our historical language." Dr. Chen activates a display that shows our timeline as a branching river with thousands of possible futures, most of which end in different types of disaster within the next 70 years. "The Temporal Reconstruction Engine represents our attempt to guide human development along sustainable pathways," she explains, her words creating holographic models that paint concepts directly into our understanding. "Guide?" I ask, though the clinical term makes me uncomfortable in ways I can't explain. "Influence through strategic placement of advanced technology in historical contexts," clarifies Dr. Bode. Sandra Kim, their temporal physicist, her equipment generating readings that make Elena's instruments scream with feedback. The precision of pyramid construction, the astronomical knowledge of ancient civilizations, the sudden technological leaps that characterized human development, RS, all results of carefully managed temporal intervention. Elena examines their temporal technology with growing amazement, her scientific training helping her understand principles that shouldn't exist for decades. "The energy requirements for time travel must be enormous," she observes, studying devices that bend space around them like living things. "How do you power something that manipulates causality itself?" "We don't power it," Webb admits with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "The machine draws energy from quantum fluctuations across multiple timelines simultaneously. It's powered by the universe's own uncertainty, but it's the display of recorded previous interventions that makes me understand the true scope of what we're facing." Chen shows us footage of their teams working throughout human history, agents dressed as medieval scholars introducing mathematical concepts centuries early, advisors to Renaissance inventors, providing inspiration for technologies that advanced civilization by decades, and most unsettling, figures in contemporary clothing guiding modern research projects toward discoveries that serve their temporal goals. "Every major breakthrough in human history," Chen explains, as the recordings show their people influencing everything from the development of agriculture to the invention of the internet, has been enhanced through temporal guidance designed to prevent civilizational collapse. Ahmed studies the hieroglyphic communication system these time travelers use, discovering that ancient Egyptian serves as their baseline language for temporal coordination. "You're not the only ones," he says, his translation skills revealing messages from other temporal factions. "There are competing groups conducting interventions." "The timeline wars," Dr. Kim confirms, her expression growing grim as she shows us star charts that track temporal activity throughout local spacetime. Multiple future timelines attempting to guide the past toward their preferred outcomes. We represent just one faction in a conflict that spans centuries. Through the machine's displays, I watch something that redefines my understanding of reality. Competing teams of time travelers from different possible futures working throughout human history, each group trying to nudge development toward outcomes that ensure their particular timeline's survival. "But why us?" Elena asks, studying readouts that show our archaeological team was specifically selected for this encounter. "Why reveal yourselves to our expedition?" Webb consults data that shows our team's psychological profiles, research backgrounds, and personal histories analyzed in detail that suggests decades of observation. "Because your discoveries over the next 5 years will determine whether humanity develops temporal technology safely or destroys itself in the attempt." "Our discoveries?" I ask, though part of me already fears the answer. Chen activates a display that shows our future research projects, FA work we haven't even imagined yet, but which their historical records show we will pursue based on what we learn in this chamber. Dr. Mitchell, your archaeological methodology combined with Dr. Rodriguez's physics background and Dr. Hassan's linguistic expertise will produce the theoretical framework that makes controlled time travel possible. We're not just witnesses to temporal intervention, I realize with growing understanding. We're the origin point for your entire civilization's relationship with time. But it's Elena who makes the connection that changes everything. If we're responsible for developing the technology you're using, and you're using it to guide our development toward creating that technology. She trails off as the implications hit her. A causal loop, Kim confirms. Your discoveries lead to our temporal capability, which allows us to ensure you make those discoveries. The timeline is self-reinforcing. As the chamber fills with the hum of temporal technology, and my team struggles to understand our role in a causal loop that spans decades, I realize our archaeological expedition has become something far more significant, the foundation moment for humanity's entire relationship with time travel. But the tension on our visitors' faces tells me something their words haven't. Not everyone in the future agrees on how history should be shaped, and the timeline they're fighting to preserve is under siege from those who see temporal manipulation as humanity's ultimate catastrophe. There are 3 ships materializing above us right now, Dr. Chen says, her temporal monitors shrieking like reality itself is tearing apart. Through the crystalline walls of the chamber, I watch new flashes of controlled lightning split the air this time, revealing another faction of time travelers. Their uniforms bear different insignias, their movements sharper, and the weapons in their hands distort the air with waves of lethal energy. The fragile calm of our archaeological triumph dissolves instantly. Chen's team drops their scholarly demeanor and pivots into combat readiness, their instruments unfolding into shield projectors and temporal barriers that shimmer around the chamber. Above us, the clash begins, not the boom of explosions, but the grinding, bone-deep sound of competing technologies colliding as each side struggles to overwrite the other's version of reality. Timeline Epsilon 9 enforcement team requesting immediate evacuation of unauthorized temporal contamination announces a voice that seems to come from the stone walls themselves, speaking English with mathematical precision that makes my teeth ache. Contemporary subjects must be relocated to temporal quarantine facilities for processing. Elena's instruments detect massive energy signatures throughout the pyramid complex as multiple temporal factions deploy technologies that operate on principles that make our physics textbooks look like children's drawings. There are at least 4 different groups up there, she reports, her voice shaking as she watches readings that show space-time itself becoming a battlefield. The Anti-Temporal Coalition, Dr. Webb explains grimly, as he activates defensive systems that create bubbles of stable causality around our archaeological team. Extremist faction from a timeline where temporal technology was never developed. They believe time travel threatens the fundamental structure of reality. Ahmed translates hieroglyphic messages that appear on different sections of the machine's surface, each temporal faction using the ancient writing system to assert their territorial claims over our time period. They're arguing over jurisdiction, he reports. Each group claims legal authority over historical intervention based on different versions of international temporal law. Through the machine's displays, I watch the scope of the timeline wars unfold across human history. Competing teams of time travelers from different possible futures, working throughout the past, each group trying to guide development toward outcomes that ensure their timeline's survival, while preventing their competitors from achieving similar goals. Timeline, Omega-12 Archaeological Preservation Unit, demanding immediate cessation of temporal contamination protocols, broadcasts another voice, this one carrying authority that makes the chamber's walls vibrate with harmonic frequencies. Historical authenticity must be maintained through non-intervention policies. Dr. Kim coordinates with her team to establish communication protocols with the warring temporal factions while maintaining protective barriers around our contemporary group. The problem with time travel, she explains as reality flickers around us, is that every future timeline considers its existence more important than its competitors' survival. But it's the arrival of the 4th faction that makes me understand the true scope of what we're facing. These time travelers appear not as solid humans, but as patterns of pure information, their consciousness existing in quantum states that allow them to manipulate causality through direct interface with the universe's computational structure. Information entities from timeline Sigma, me, Chen identifies, her voice carrying the controlled terror of someone who understands the implications. Post-human consciousness that transcended physical existence. They view biological time travel as primitive contamination of information space. Through the chaos of competing temporal technologies and the growing instability of local reality, Elena makes a discovery that changes everything. The temporal interventions are creating paradox formations, she announces, studying readings that show causality breaking down around us. Too many groups trying to modify the same historical period is causing reality to reject linear time. Ahmed watches his hieroglyphic translations becoming unstable as competing temporal factions attempt to modify the same ancient inscriptions simultaneously. The timeline is fracturing, he reports. Past and future are becoming disconnected. Events are happening without causes. Paradox cascade approaching critical threshold, Kim announces as her instruments detect the breakdown of causal structure throughout local space-time. If the competing interventions continue, this entire region will experience temporal collapse, effects occurring before causes, memories changing randomly, reality becoming logically impossible. Dr. Chen makes the announcement that terrifies everyone in the chamber. We have approximately 12 minutes before paradox formation becomes irreversible, she says, checking readings that show reality itself rejecting the presence of too many temporal factions in the same historical location. After that, local space-time will collapse into causal chaos that spreads throughout human history. Through the machine's displays, I watch the consequences of paradox cascade. Civilizations experiencing their own effects before their causes. Historical events happening in random order, and most terrifying, people living their lives backward while remembering forward, creating consciousness trapped between incompatible versions of causality. There's only one solution, Webb announces as he activates emergency protocols that cause the temporal machine to generate fields of stable causality around our archaeological team. The contemporary witnesses must choose which timeline to anchor. Your decision will determine which version of the future gains temporal jurisdiction and forces the others to withdraw. As the chamber shudders with the effects of competing temporal technologies and reality becomes increasingly negotiable around us, I realize our archaeological discovery has made us the arbiters of a war between different possible versions of humanity's future. The decision we make in the next few minutes won't just decide which faction seizes control of our timeline. It will determine whether causality itself endures or collapses into chaos, unraveling human history until thought itself becomes impossible. Sarah, the machine is tearing reality apart, Elena shouts as the chamber erupts in fracturing light. 3 separate groups of time travelers materialize at once, each wearing slightly different versions of future uniforms, each claiming to represent the real 2089, and each carrying weapons that warp the air with lethal shimmer. The Temporal Reconstruction Engine reacts instantly, unleashing alarms that thrum in frequencies beyond human hearing, resonating in my bones more than my ears. Through the crystalline walls, I see space-time ripple like water under siege, unstable and fragile, while Dr. Chen's trembling voice names what we're witnessing: causal interference patterns. Timeline Beta has no authority in this temporal zone, shouts a man in dark blue clothing who identifies himself as Commander Torres from what he calls the primary timeline. His team moves with military precision as they deploy equipment that creates shimmering barriers around our archaeological team. Dr. Mitchell, you must understand. The people you've been talking to represent a corrupted timeline that leads to human extinction in 2094. But Dr. Chen's team responds by activating their own defensive systems, creating zones of stable space-time that protect their position from Torres's interference. Commander Torres represents Timeline Gamma, she explains, her voice strained as she operates controls that seem to exist in multiple dimensions. His timeline achieves temporary stability by preventing technological advancement, keeping humanity trapped in endless cycles of limitation. Ahmed stares at hieroglyphic displays that now show conflicting information, depending on which temporal faction's equipment is being used to translate them. The ancient writings are changing, he reports, his voice shaking as he watches text rewrite itself in real time. Each timeline is trying to establish their version as the correct historical record. Through the chaos, a third group materializes. People wearing silver clothing with geometric patterns who speak in voices that carry mathematical harmonics. Temporal Authority Intervention Team Delta announces their leader, a woman whose eyes reflect depths that suggest she's witnessed the flow of centuries. This unauthorized temporal intersection is creating paradox cascade risks that threaten the structural integrity of causality itself. Elena's instruments go completely haywire as the competing temporal technologies create interference patterns that make our scientific equipment register impossible readings. The quantum signatures are off the charts, she reports, struggling to make sense of data that changes faster than she can record it. The presence of multiple timeline representatives is causing reality to become unstable at the fundamental level. Each timeline believes their version of the future is the only one that can prevent human extinction, explains Dr. Webb from Chen's team, his archaeological expertise allowing him to remain calm despite the chaos around us. But the temporal interference created by their competing interventions is causing exactly the kind of causal breakdown that destroys civilizations. Through the machine's displays, I watch something that makes my understanding of time collapse like a house of cards. Our archaeological dig site exists in multiple versions simultaneously, with each timeline showing different outcomes for our discovery. In Timeline Alpha, we become heroes who help guide humanity to utopian advancement. In Timeline Beta, we're tragic figures whose discovery leads to technological stagnation. In Timeline Gamma, we never existed at all. The paradox formation is accelerating, warns Authority Agent Delta, her mathematical voice creating standing waves in the dusty air around us. Multiple timeline interventions in the same temporal coordinates are creating causal loops that could collapse linear time throughout this entire historical period. Commander Torres deploys what he calls timeline stabilization protocols, but his efforts to lock our reality into his preferred version cause the other factions to respond with increasingly aggressive temporal technologies. Dr. Mitchell, you must choose which timeline to anchor, he demands. Your consciousness exists at the intersection point. Only a native temporal witness can resolve the paradox formation. But Dr. Chen reveals something that changes everything. The choice isn't between different timelines, she explains as she shows me readings that span multiple centuries. The choice is whether to maintain temporal intervention at all, or to sever this time period from future manipulation entirely. Through the machine's core systems, Ahmed discovers hieroglyphic instructions that describe a temporal independence protocol, a procedure that would permanently isolate our time period from any future timeline's ability to conduct interventions. The ancient Egyptians built this chamber with a failsafe, he announces, a way to cut our timeline free from temporal manipulation forever. Temporal independence would doom your species, Authority Agent Delta warns, her mathematical consciousness calculating probabilities with mechanical precision. Without guidance from advanced timelines, humanity faces ecological collapse in 2051, resource wars in 2063, and technological singularity disasters throughout the 2070s. But Elena makes a discovery that reveals the hidden cost of temporal intervention. The competing timelines aren't just trying to prevent disasters, she announces, studying data streams that flow between the temporal factions. They're harvesting resources from our time period to fuel their own civilizations. We're not being protected, we're being farmed. As the temporal factions continue their conflict with weapons that edit history itself, deleting and restoring events in real time, I realize that our archaeological discovery has made us the center of a war where the prize isn't just the right to guide human development, but the right to exploit our timeline's resources to sustain competing versions of humanity's future. The machine is offering us a choice. I tell my team, as paradox formations continue to spread throughout the chamber, accept guidance from one of these timelines and become their resource extraction point, or activate temporal independence and face the future without any safety net from advanced civilizations. Ahmed translates final warnings from the hieroglyphic displays. Choose quickly, Dr. Mitchell. The paradox formation is approaching critical mass. In approximately 3 minutes, the causal breakdown will become irreversible, and linear time will collapse throughout this entire historical period. As reality fractures around us, and rival temporal factions prepare for their final clash, I realize the choice we make in the next few minutes will echo across centuries, deciding whether humanity shapes its own destiny or becomes a resource colony for competing versions of ourselves. Elena, the quantum foam is collapsing, I shout as space-time shatters like glass. Fragments of alternate realities flare around us. Versions of this chamber, where different choices were made, different factions stand, and human history is already rewritten. The Temporal Reconstruction Engine groans under the strain of holding local causality together, while agents from 3 timelines unleash weapons that don't just kill, they erase their targets from existence entirely. Through the chaos, Dr. Chen rallies her team, activating what she calls Temporal Independence Protocol Zeta, a desperate safeguard designed to isolate our century behind a causal firewall, forever cutting it off from intervention. But as her trembling hands show me the projections, the cost of independence becomes clear. A future where humanity survives, yes, but stripped of guidance from civilizations that might have carried us further than we could ever go alone. The disasters we're trying to prevent will happen, Chen admits as she displays timeline models showing ecological collapse in 2051, resource wars in the 2060s, and technological singularity events that destroy human civilization as we know it. Without temporal guidance, your species follows historical patterns that lead to extinction or worse. Director Zhang from the Omega-7 timeline implements emergency extraction protocols that begin pulling members of our archaeological team into her timeline, claiming legal authority under temporal protection statutes that treat unenhanced humans as endangered species, requiring preservation. Dr. Hassan, Dr. Rodriguez, you will be relocated to protected historical reserves where your genetic and cultural patterns can be maintained without contamination from paradox exposure. But Ahmed and Elena resist extraction, their hands gripping archaeological equipment that somehow anchors them to our original timeline, despite the temporal forces trying to remove them from causality entirely. We choose to remain in our own time, Ahmed announces, his voice carrying conviction that transcends the terror of watching reality become negotiable around us. Dr. Webb reveals the archaeological evidence that changes everything. The machine contains records of previous temporal independence events, he explains, showing hieroglyphic accounts of civilizations that chose to sever themselves from temporal manipulation. Some succeeded in developing sustainable futures without external guidance. Others didn't. Through the machine's historical database, I watch the consequences of temporal independence across multiple civilizations. Species that thrived through creative solutions to seemingly impossible challenges, and others that destroyed themselves through predictable mistakes that temporal guidance could have prevented. The real choice, I realize as paradox formations continue to spread and the competing temporal factions prepare for final confrontation, isn't between guided development and independent disaster. It's between accepting that consciousness has the right to make its own mistakes, or surrendering that right for guaranteed survival. Elena accesses the machine's core programming, discovering that the Temporal Independence Protocol requires unanimous consent from all contemporary witnesses. Our entire archaeological team must choose isolation from future intervention, knowing that the decision will echo across centuries and cannot be undone. Sarah, Chen says, her future knowledge giving her insight into consequences I can only guess at. If you activate temporal independence, you're condemning your species to face every challenge without help from those who've already learned the solutions. Millions will die from disasters we could have prevented. But as I watch the temporal factions fighting over the right to control human development, treating our civilization like a prize to be won rather than a species with the right to self-determination, I understand that some choices are more important than their consequences. Ahmed, Elena, I say, looking at my teammates as reality continues to fracture around us. We have to decide not just for ourselves, but for every human who will ever live. Do we accept guidance that guarantees survival but eliminates genuine choice? Or do we preserve the right to fail on our own terms? As the machine's temporal independence protocol waits for our unanimous decision, and the warring future factions prepare to settle their dispute through methods that could eliminate our timeline entirely, I realize that our archaeological discovery has given us the power to make the most important choice in human history, whether consciousness has the right to remain free even when freedom leads to suffering. The chamber thrums with unstable energy, as if it already knows the decision before us whether to bind humanity to a guided future or grant us the terrible freedom of complete temporal independence, a choice that will reverberate across millennia. Sarah, the machine is tearing itself apart. Elena cries as crystalline components spark with currents that rattle our bones, make our teeth ache, and raise every hair on our bodies. Around us, the timeline war reaches its climax. Factions, unleashing weapons that don't just destroy, but erase entire years from existence. Our own archaeological notes rewrite themselves in real time as history buckles and reforms under their attacks. The chamber has become a battlefield where three versions of humanity fight for dominion over our century, wielding technologies that treat reality like editable code. Dr. Chen's faction fires weapons that restore events erased from history. Director Zhang's forces counter with devices that optimize timelines into streamlined efficiency. And a third, unknown group arrives with beams that freeze moments in shimmering amber, sealing them beyond the reach of any further alteration. "The paradox levels are critical," shouts Dr. Kim from Chen's team as she works frantically at equipment that measures the stability of cause and effect relationships. "If the competing interventions continue, local space-time will collapse into a causal singularity, where events happen without reasons, and effects precede their causes." Through the chaos, Ahmed translates hieroglyphic warnings that appear on the machine's surface in ancient Egyptian script that updates faster than human eyes can follow. "The inscriptions are changing," he reports with panic in his voice. "They're describing multiple versions of this moment happening simultaneously. We're experiencing temporal fracture." Elena points her instruments at the machine's core, discovering readings that make her face go white with terror. "The Temporal Reconstruction Engine isn't just a communication device," she announces. "It's also an emergency system designed to sever timeline connections if paradox formation threatens causal collapse. But activation requires unanimous consent from all contemporary witnesses. Through the machine's displays, I watch what happens when timelines fracture completely. Civilizations that exist in loops, where their end causes their beginning. Worlds where people are born before their parents meet. And most horrifying, realities where consciousness becomes impossible because thoughts can't form logical connections between ideas." Dr. Mitchell, Director Zhang calls out as her faction's weapons create zones of perfect temporal stability around our group. "You must choose which timeline gains jurisdiction over this historical period. Delay will result in causal cascade that eliminates the possibility of coherent existence." But Dr. Chen reveals an option that none of the competing factions want us to consider. "The machine can activate temporal independence protocol," she explains as, "Explosions of disrupted causality make the chamber shake with the violence of reality being torn apart. Permanent isolation from all future intervention. Your timeline becomes completely self-determining." "What does that mean?" I ask, though part of me already understands the implications. "It means no help," Chen admits as her team continues fighting to maintain their position in the temporal battlefield. "No guidance from advanced civilizations, no prevented disasters, no technological assistance. Humanity faces every challenge alone, with only your current knowledge and creativity." Ahmed discovers the true scope of what temporal independence would mean by translating instructions that appear throughout the machine's systems. "Every future that could offer guidance would be permanently cut off," he reports. "No warnings about coming disasters, no hints about solutions to problems we can't solve yet. Complete developmental isolation." Elena studies the consequences of each choice through the machine's projection systems. Timeline Alpha provides technological guidance, but limits creative development. Timeline Beta offers solutions to major problems, but requires social optimization. Timeline Omega prevents disasters, but eliminates individual freedom. Temporal independence preserves freedom, but guarantees no external help with existential threats. The battle around us intensifies, as each faction realizes we're considering the one option they all fear, cutting humanity loose from future influence entirely. "Temporal independence is a death sentence for developing civilizations," warns Dr. Park from Chen's team. 70% of species that choose isolation face extinction within 500 years, but 30% achieve sustainable development through independent innovation, counters Dr. Webb, who seems to support the independence option, despite his loyalty to Chen's faction. Those civilizations that survive temporal independence often become more creative and adaptable than guided species. Through the chaos of temporal warfare, I watch the machine's emergency systems preparing for activation. The Temporal Independence Protocol requires all three contemporary witnesses, Elena, Ahmed, and me, to place our hands on the central console simultaneously while choosing to sever our timeline from all future interference. "If we do this," Elena says, her voice shaking as she studies projection models showing humanity's possible futures without guidance, "every preventable disaster becomes our responsibility to prevent. Every solvable problem becomes our challenge to solve. Every technological advancement must come from our own research and development, and every solution we create will be genuinely ours." Ahmed adds, his archaeological expertise helping him understand the implications. Every achievement will represent actual human capability rather than guided development. Every mistake will teach us lessons that no external civilization can provide. The competing future factions pause their battle as they realize what we're considering, their weapons aimed at each other, but their attention focused on our small group. Choose quickly, Director Zhang demands. Causal stability is approaching critical failure. Soon the choice will be made for you by the collapse of logical possibility itself. As I look at Elena and Ahmed, my teammates who've shared this impossible discovery, I understand that our decision will echo across centuries. We can accept guidance that guarantees survival but eliminates genuine independence, or we can choose the terrible freedom of facing the universe without safety nets. Whatever we choose, I tell my team as the machine's emergency systems await our decision, we choose for every human who will ever live. Do we accept help that comes with control, or do we preserve the right to succeed or fail on our own terms? The chamber hums with a patient energy, as if it knows the choice has already been made whether humanity remains tethered to guided development or takes the dangerous leap into complete temporal independence. Around us, the timeline war halts in a breathless silence, three versions of humanity's future watching to see if their past remains open to influence, or if we've finally chosen to grow up and face existence alone. Elena, these numbers are terrifying, I whisper, 3 days later, as we sit in our makeshift surface laboratory. Reports pour in from across the world, each one another confirmation of the cost of severing our connection to future guidance. The consequences are unfolding faster than any of us imagined. Projects that had stood on the brink of breakthrough collapse into dead ends, revealing just how much of our progress had been nudged from the shadows. Cancer research centers report once promising treatments failing without explanation. Climate solutions, once tantalizingly close, now look like they'll need decades of work. Space programs that seemed ready to push beyond Mars are suddenly crippled by engineering puzzles no one alive knows how to solve. The economic impact is staggering. Ahmed reports from his computer terminal, where he's monitoring global news feeds, showing stock markets crashing as investors realize that dozens of high-tech companies were secretly dependent on future-guided innovation. Entire industries that relied on temporally assisted development are facing collapse. But the most unsettling discovery comes from Elena's analysis of worldwide accident statistics. Traffic accidents have increased by 40%, she announces, her voice shaking as she reads the data. It's as if humanity has been receiving subtle warning systems from the future that prevented countless disasters, and now we're facing the normal accident rate for a species without temporal guidance. Through our communication equipment, I receive updates from archaeological sites around the globe, where similar temporal machines have gone completely dormant. Stonehenge's hidden chambers no longer emit electromagnetic signatures. The Easter Island statues have stopped their mysterious underground humming. Machu Picchu's precisely fitted stones show no trace of the energy patterns that once suggested advanced construction techniques. We're not just temporally independent, I realize as I review the global reports. We've lost every technological advantage that future civilizations were providing. Humanity is now developing completely on its own for the first time in thousands of years. Ahmed discovers something in the machine's final recordings that makes the situation even more complex. The hieroglyphic logs show that temporal guidance was gradually reducing over the past century. He translates from crystal storage devices that retain their data, despite losing their ability to update. Future civilizations were preparing us for independence by slowly decreasing their intervention levels. Elena studies atmospheric readings that confirm one of our worst fears, the climate change accelerations we were tracking. She reports grimly, they were being artificially slowed by temporal intervention. Without future guidance helping to moderate weather patterns, global warming is proceeding at its natural rate. But it's the message from Dr. Hassan, our expedition leader who remained at base camp during our underground discovery, that reveals the full scope of what we've chosen. Sarah, governments worldwide are demanding answers. He broadcasts from our surface communication array. Satellite data shows that the temporal independence pulse originated from our excavation site. They want to know what you found down there. We can't tell them the truth, Elena says, her scientific ethics warring with the magnitude of our secret. How do we explain that we've just cut humanity off from help that was preventing disasters, solving problems, and guiding technological development? Ahmed faces a different crisis as he realizes the implications for historical scholarship. Every archaeological mystery that seemed to suggest ancient advanced knowledge, he says, staring at evidence that thousands of years of human achievement were enhanced by temporal guidance. All of it was real, but none of it represents natural human development. Through our equipment, I monitor global innovation rates in the weeks following temporal independence, discovering something that partially balances the negative consequences. Creative output is increasing in unexpected areas, I report. Artists, musicians, and writers are producing works that seem more genuinely human, more emotionally authentic than anything from the past decade. Because they're no longer unconsciously influenced by future aesthetic trends, Elena realizes. For the first time in human history, creative expression is coming entirely from contemporary human consciousness. The weight of our decision becomes personal when Ahmed receives news that his sister's medical research team, which was on the verge of a breakthrough in treating childhood leukemia, has encountered setbacks that could delay their work by years. Without temporal guidance providing subtle insights, he says, his voice heavy with guilt, how many people will suffer from problems that future medicine could have prevented? But Elena makes a discovery that reframes our understanding of temporal independence. The accident statistics are stabilizing, she announces after analyzing data patterns. Humans are adapting to the absence of temporal guidance faster than projected. We're learning to be more careful, more aware, more responsible for our own safety. And the innovation rates in problem solving are accelerating, I add. Watching reports of collaborative research projects that are approaching challenges with creativity that temporal guidance might have stifled. Without predetermined solutions from the future, researchers are exploring approaches that could lead to discoveries no guided civilization ever imagined. As I prepare our expedition report, TNA, a document that will describe our discovery as an interesting but inconclusive archaeological finding, rather than the revelation that humanity has chosen temporal independence, I understand that our choice has given us something profound. The right to grow through our own mistakes, to solve problems through our own creativity, and to face the universe as a species that earned its achievements rather than receiving them as gifts. The machine is completely dormant now, Ahmed observes as we review security camera footage from the sealed chamber. Whatever connection it provided to future civilizations has been permanently severed. Elena studies long-term projections for human development without temporal guidance. The models show higher failure rates for individual projects, she reports, but also higher rates of unexpected breakthroughs. We're trading certainty for the possibility of genuine surprise. Through our monitoring equipment, I watch humanity beginning to adapt to temporal independence with the resilience that has defined our species throughout history. Without subtle guidance from advanced civilizations, humans are working harder, cooperating more effectively, and approaching challenges with determination that temporal assistance might have made unnecessary. The dig site that began as just another excavation has become the place where humanity finally chose to grow up, cutting ourselves free from parental supervision by our own future, and accepting both the dangers and the raw potential of facing existence alone. Sarah, we're not the only ones who found a machine, Ahmed blurts out as he bursts into our monitoring station 6 months after temporal independence, his arms full of reports from around the globe. Archaeological teams everywhere are suddenly uncovering dormant devices that weren't there before, as if severing our timeline triggered backup systems waiting for the moment primary connections failed. Elena's coffee mug shatters on the floor as she scrolls through the incoming data streams, her face going pale. Teotihuacan. The Smithsonian team just found a crystal chamber beneath the Pyramid of the Sun. The British expedition at Stonehenge detected an entire ring of buried machines under the monument. Even Easter Island researchers are reporting temporal engines hidden inside the Moai, and their radar swears those cavities didn't exist a week ago. Thank you for watching now. Across our global comms network, the pattern is undeniable. 47 separate sites, all revealing dormant temporal technology at once. The devices appear silent, inert, but their sudden emergence can't be coincidence. It feels less like discovery and more like revelation, as though history itself had been holding these fail-safes in reserve, waiting for the moment humanity finally severed the leash. It's like the future civilizations planted backup devices, Ahmed observes as he studies hieroglyphic messages that have appeared at multiple sites worldwide, all written in the same ancient Egyptian script, but containing warnings about emergency temporal protocols and historical continuity protection systems. But the most unsettling discovery comes from Elena's analysis of global innovation patterns. Since temporal independence, human creativity is exploding in ways that don't match any historical precedent, she reports, showing charts that track artistic output, scientific discoveries, and technological innovations. It's as if removing future guidance unlocked creative potential that was being suppressed. The artistic renaissance proves particularly dramatic. Musicians around the world report sudden inspiration for compositions that blend traditional instruments with sounds that no human has ever made before. Painters create works that express emotions that seem beyond normal human experience. Writers produce literature that explores concepts their contemporary education never taught them. The children are the most affected, Ahmed says, monitoring educational reports from around the globe. Kids born after temporal independence show different learning patterns. They ask questions that teachers can't answer. They solve problems using methods that don't exist in any textbook. They play games that seem to follow rules from somewhere else. Elena discovers something in the innovation data that makes her hands shake as she shows me the graphs. The rate of breakthrough discoveries has tripled since temporal independence, she announces. Medical researchers are finding cures through approaches that temporal guidance never suggested. Engineers are designing technologies that work on principles we barely understand. Even social scientists are developing new models for human cooperation. But the most profound change appears in global collaboration patterns. Without future guidance providing optimal solutions to international conflicts, nations have begun developing cooperative approaches that emphasize creative problem-solving over predetermined diplomatic frameworks. The United Nations is functioning more effectively than it has in decades. I observe, watching reports of international agreements that address climate change, resource distribution, and technological development through shared innovation rather than competitive advantage. Look at the space program coordination, Elena adds, displaying reports from space agencies worldwide that have begun collaborating on Mars mission plans using entirely contemporary technology. Instead of competing for temporal guidance advantages, they're pooling resources and expertise to develop interplanetary capability through current human knowledge. Ahmed makes a discovery that reframes our understanding of what temporal independence really means. The backup machines aren't just appearing, he reports after analyzing the hieroglyphic messages from global sites. They're activating, not for communication with the future, but for something else. The inscriptions describe indigenous development protocols and creative enhancement systems. Through our monitoring equipment, I track the effects of the activated backup systems. Regions near the archaeological sites show increased innovation rates, enhanced artistic expression, and improved cooperative problem-solving capabilities. The machines aren't providing guidance from the future, I realize. They're amplifying natural human creativity that was being suppressed by temporal dependence. Elena studies the technological developments emerging near the activated sites, discovering engineering solutions that work on principles no future civilization ever suggested. Solar energy systems that operate at efficiency levels our physics thought impossible. Water purification methods that use naturally occurring chemical processes. Transportation technologies that integrate with biological systems instead of replacing them. But the most significant change appears in children's cognitive development patterns. Educational systems worldwide are reporting that kids near the archaeological sites demonstrate enhanced problem-solving abilities, Ahmed announces. Not just improved memory or faster processing, but genuinely creative approaches to learning that suggest expanded consciousness capabilities. The global implications become clear as I review reports from international research networks. Humanity isn't just adapting to temporal independence, I announced to my team. We're discovering capabilities that temporal guidance was preventing us from developing. The future civilizations weren't just helping us, they were limiting us. Elena displays comparative analysis, showing innovation rates before and after temporal independence. Future guidance provided optimal solutions to specific problems, she explains, but optimal solutions prevent the exploration of alternative approaches that might lead to breakthrough discoveries. Through our communication networks, I watch humanity developing technologies that no guided civilization ever imagined. Biological computers that grow rather than being manufactured. Architectural systems that adapt to environmental changes like living organisms, and communication methods that operate through quantum entanglement between human consciousness and natural systems. The backup machines are teaching us to develop our own capabilities instead of relying on external guidance, Ahmed realizes as he translates instructions that appear on monitors worldwide. They're not giving us answers, they're showing us how to ask better questions. As I review the global transformation occurring in the months following temporal independence, I understand that our archaeological discovery didn't just cut humanity off from future help, it unlocked human potential that was being suppressed by dependence on. The machines emerging worldwide aren't backup relays for temporal communication, they're graduation gifts. Future civilizations always knew humanity's greatest leaps wouldn't come from walking a path they laid out, but from discovering what we're capable of when we're finally free to surprise ourselves. Elena, they want to open every site, I whisper, scanning the emergency directive from the United Nations Archaeological Commission. The global mandate is clear. Excavate and activate every device that appeared after our independence choice. But their plan risks undoing everything we fought for, reconnecting humanity to guidance systems that may be even more controlling than the ones we severed. Ahmed looks up from his translations, his face drained of color. The machines aren't just enhancements, he says, holding up a page of newly translated glyphs. They're reintegration systems. If too many are activated at once, they'll override our independence and plug Earth back into intervention networks. Through our monitoring feeds, I watch teams across 47 sites preparing to wake the dormant devices, convinced they're unlocking humanity's potential. But Elena's analysis tells a different story. These machines carry quantum signatures designed for control, not freedom. And if the commission proceeds, we may lose the very independence we sacrificed everything to achieve. Each activated device creates a small breach in our temporal isolation, Elena explains, her instruments detecting quantum fluctuations that grow stronger as more archaeological teams report successful machine activation. If 23 or more devices come online, the combined breaches will collapse our independence firewall entirely. The race against time becomes personal when Ahmed receives word that his former professor, Dr. Hassan Mahmoud, is leading the excavation team at Saqqara, where they've discovered a temporal device larger than the one we found at Giza. Hassan doesn't know what he's really activating, Ahmed says, his voice heavy with the responsibility of preserving humanity's independence. He thinks he's unlocking ancient wisdom, not surrendering our future to external control. Elena monitors activation status reports from around the globe as archaeological teams treat the temporal devices like puzzles to be solved rather than systems that could eliminate human self-determination. Stonehenge, activated. Teotihuacan, activated. Easter Island, activated. She reads from the global network. 18 sites online and counting. But the most disturbing development comes from satellite imagery, showing that the activated temporal devices are beginning to coordinate with each other, creating a global network that operates independently of human control. They're not waiting for archaeological teams to activate them. I realize as I watch dormant devices powering up automatically in response to the growing network. The machines are activating themselves. Ahmed translates real-time hieroglyphic updates that appear on active devices worldwide, revealing the true purpose of the backup system. The inscriptions describe temporal custody protocol, he reports with growing alarm. If humanity proves incapable of guided development, the backup network will implement permanent supervision to prevent civilizational collapse. Through our communication array, I receive desperate messages from archaeological teams worldwide, who are discovering that their activated temporal devices cannot be shut down through any contemporary technology. The machines have begun generating fields that enhance human creativity, while simultaneously monitoring and recording every thought, innovation, and cultural development for transmission to future evaluation systems. We have perhaps 6 hours before the network reaches critical mass, Elena announces as her quantum detectors show the growing strength of temporal breach formations. Once 23 devices achieve full activation, our independence choice becomes irreversible. Humanity will be permanently reconnected to future guidance systems with enhanced monitoring protocols. The solution becomes clear when Ahmed discovers override instructions hidden in the original Giza machine's crystal memory banks. The temporal independence activation can be amplified, he explains, showing hieroglyphic procedures for using our dormant device to strengthen the firewall that protects human self-determination. But amplification requires a sacrifice. Elena studies the technical requirements for firewall amplification, her face growing pale as she understands the implications. The procedure requires someone to serve as a permanent interface between the machine and our timeline. She explains, consciousness integration that maintains temporal independence, but prevents the person from ever returning to normal human existence. Through our monitoring equipment, I watch the global network approaching critical activation levels as more backup devices come online without human intervention. 19 sites active, Elena reports. The network is beginning to generate the quantum resonance patterns that will collapse our temporal independence. Ahmed volunteers for consciousness integration before I can stop him. I understand the hieroglyphic control systems better than anyone, he argues as he moves toward the Giza machine's reactivation controls. My linguistic capabilities make me the logical choice for permanent interface with temporal technology. No, I say, placing my hand over his on the control panel. This was my discovery, my choice to activate independence, my responsibility to preserve it. I'll serve as the consciousness interface. Elena joins us at the control panel, her scientific training making her the most qualified to understand the technical aspects of consciousness integration. We do this together, she decides. Distributed consciousness interface, all three of us sharing the load so no one person has to sacrifice their entire humanity. As the global temporal network reaches 21 active sites, and our instruments detect the first signs of independence, firewall degradation, we activate the consciousness integration protocol that will permanently link our awareness to the temporal independence system. The integration feels like becoming part of something larger while remaining distinctly ourselves. My consciousness expands to monitor temporal breach activity throughout Earth's timeline while retaining my memories, personality, and emotional connections. Ahmed's linguistic abilities allow him to communicate with any future attempts at temporal intrusion. Elena's scientific expertise provides the technical understanding necessary to maintain firewall integrity across geological timescales. Integration successful. We announce in perfect unison, our separate consciousnesses now permanently linked to the system that preserves humanity's right to develop independently. Temporal independence firewall amplified to maximum strength. Backup network activation prevented. Through our enhanced awareness, we watch the global temporal devices shutting down one by one as the amplified independence field cuts them off from future control systems. Archaeological teams worldwide report that their machines have become inert artifacts, impressive but powerless remnants of technologies that no longer threaten human self-determination. Humanity remains free, Elena observes through our shared consciousness, as we monitor global development patterns that show continued creative acceleration without external guidance. Our sacrifice preserves everyone else's right to grow through their own choices. Ahmed adds his perspective, as we watch children around the world continuing to demonstrate enhanced creative capabilities without temporal enhancement devices. The creativity boost was never from the machines, he realizes. It was from the confidence that comes with knowing your achievements are genuinely your own. As I settle into my new existence as guardian of human temporal independence, simultaneously individual and collective, human and technological, I understand that our archaeological discovery has become something more profound than first contact with the future. It has become the moment when humanity chose to grow up, accepting both the responsibility and the joy of facing the universe as consciousness that refuses to be anything other than beautifully, stubbornly, genuinely free.